Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Veronika Sonsev, and I'm the co-founder of CommerceNext, a community and conference for digital retailers. Welcome to the CommerceNext webinar on COVID-19 marketing benchmarks. This is the second webinar in this series. At last count, we had over 300 people register for this webinar. CommerceNext is grateful for the opportunity to share new and valuable information with our community during these uncertain times. We hope you're all staying healthy and safe, and that all of your businesses are weathering the storm as best as possible. Thank you for tuning in today and for making time to join live or to listen to the replay. I want to start with a few important thank yous. First, I want to thank our speakers, John Hazen, CMO of Boot Barn, Joe Yakul, CEO of Within, and Bill Blass, CMO of FULLBEAUTY Brands. Hearing insights from those on the front lines is extremely useful. We recognize how busy you are, and I want to thank you for taking the time to share your insights with our community. We're also excited to partner with Within on this webinar. Within has analyzed first-party e-commerce data from its roster of 75 clients to create an index that tracks trends in e-commerce revenue, digital media spend, and conversion rates relative to a pre-COVID benchmarks. We think this data will be valuable for the CommerceNext community, and we're excited to have them share it with us. Also, nearly 100 digital retail executives took our second CommerceNext survey earlier this week. We're going to be sharing a few slides with data from that survey today, and we'll be sharing the full report on that tomorrow. We want to thank you for taking the time to complete the survey and share what's happening in your business anonymously. And also, please be on the lookout for our next survey, which will take place on April 13th. We would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete the survey so that we can keep everyone informed. So our agenda for today, I'm going to go through a few housekeeping notes, and then I'll turn it over to Within to review the benchmarking data. I'll share a few slides from the CommerceNext survey. We're going to engage all of you with some quick polls, and then we'll have a panel discussion followed by audience Q&A. So don't worry about whether you miss anything. We're recording this webinar and we'll make it available for replay. I'm just going to take a couple moments to show you where things are on the screen. So to the right of the screen with the slides, you'll see a white box. That white box is where you can ask questions. You just click on the Q&A link and then enter in your question on the bottom. Scott is reviewing all the questions and will publish them to the audience. Also, if you're interested in getting the slides from the webinar, they're available also in the top link. You'll see a link for handouts. And in the handout section, you'll see a download of the deck that's available anytime. So with that, I want to turn it over to Joe. Joe, if you want to introduce Within and share a little bit about the benchmarking data.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us here, Veronika. It's great to be with you and the CommerceNext community. So to kick things off, for those of you who don't know who we are, I'm Joe Yakul, CEO of Within, and we're a performance branding company and a name that we really coined because we want to really make sure that we're helping brands with their growth in a way that is really collapsing the funnel between what was traditionally looked at as mutually exclusive between brand marketing and performance marketing. So what we mean by that is brand marketing is typically looked at as something that is used to build emotional connections with consumers, while performance marketing was something that was used for kind of more of that direct response nature, trying to get somebody to take an action, buy this right now, $20 off, free shipping, click this ad before your computer explodes. And we really believe that to be most effective with your marketing dollars, you really need to think about things in terms of long-term profitability. And if you think for a moment about what all of our companies are here to do beyond the great products and services we offer, and maybe missions or visions that we have for our businesses, we're all really in the business of generating profit for our investors or shareholders. And for some reason, that focus of long-term profitability ends up going missing when it comes down to the marketing program and the marketing teams. And we believe that if you take that that critical kind of mission of the business of returning, profit to your shareholders and thinking about things in the long term to your marketing business, it really is much more critical than to both build brand and elevate brand while also driving people down the path to conversion. And that's really what we mean by performance branding. So if we go to this next slide here, this is just a list of some of the clients that we work with, and we're really proud to be partnered with these brands. We power all of digital North America across search and social for Nike, but as well as many other great brands, including Purple and Spanx and Shake Shack and Carbon 38 and AB InBev and others. So we're really in the business of maximizing growth through paid acquisition channels, digital OTT, even things like direct mail and shared mail, and really powering that on the backbone of lifetime value analysis and full funnel attribution. So with that said, we're going to jump right into our dashboard. If you'd like to take a look at the dashboard itself, feel free to check it out. You can go to within.co and you'll be able to follow along the links there to check out the dashboard live, and we are updating it every day and continuing to add new graphs and new data elements, as well as insights about clients of ours, as well as just other brands in the industry that are beating the benchmarks. So if you'd like to follow along as we continue to update these graphs or get those insights, definitely feel free to check it out at within.co, and you can also sign up for daily updates and insights. But I'd like to take a moment to explain, starting with Omnichannel, a little bit about what you're seeing here. And as you can see on the screen, we're graphing revenue, but we're also graphing ad spend on Google versus Facebook, as well as graphing conversion rate. And starting with conversion rate, I think it's really interesting, and we get a lot of questions about it. And the obvious question that you'll get by looking at this graph is, why in the world is conversion rate showing that up so high, 40, 50, 60%, depending on the day that you're looking at? And conversion rate's probably the trickiest one to understand, because the conversion rate is greatly impacted by the traffic that is coming to the site. And if you take a look at the spend on Google and Facebook with these omnichannel brands, it starts to tell a deeper story. With Google spend down about 40% and Facebook spend up only about 20%, there's a lot less traffic coming to these sites than normal. And therefore, the traffic mix is shifting, with a smaller percentage of traffic coming in from new to site visitors, which is skewing the conversion rate in a way that makes it appear much higher. The other thing that's happening with omnichannel, of course, is that all stores are closed, and most, if not all, kind of retail stores that are non-essential are closed. And we'll talk in a bit with some folks on the panel that have kind of both sides of the equation of essential. But what you're seeing here is also a shift away from the retail environment to the online environment, where for omnichannel retailers and for their customers that are normally being able to purchase their products through many different distribution methods, whether it's big box retailers, specialty retail, or online, those distribution channels are now really disappearing and leaving online as the only resort. So you're getting a lot of loyal customers that are normally buying at retail that are now coming and buying online, and especially coming to these websites as a destination, which is another reason why you're seeing conversion rate pick up, but revenue also pick up to pre-COVID levels. So let's flip over to pure play ecom to kind of look at these side by side now. On the pure play ecom side, you're seeing quite a different story. Not nearly as much of a bounce back here as you saw in omnichannel. Again, omnichannel bouncing back in a large part because we're only graphing the e-commerce revenue from those omnichannel brands. And because a lot of their consumers are now forced to shop online, the online business appears to be flat to pre-COVID benchmark levels, but of course not making up anywhere close to the amount of revenue being lost at retail stores. Where on pure play ecom, you're seeing revenue down about 50% and staying there at this point since about March 15th or so, when a lot of the stores were forced to close, and commerce as we we knew it and understood it completely changed. So you're seeing conversion rate here hold steady at down about 30%, and revenue down about 50%, while spend on Google has really taken the biggest hit, down about 60% or so. Facebook spend is where you see things have picked up a bit more, and coming in at around the 40% mark, but in certain cases peaking up almost about 20% down from pre-benchmark levels. And the reason for this is because of all of the promotional activity happening. A lot of brands are struggling to make cash flow needs, struggling to hit revenue goals, and because search demand is evaporating, they're finding other ways to drive traffic to the site and get the message out about their merch or about their promos. And using push channels like social media is one of the most effective ways of doing that. But let's flip over to one of our verticals here now, looking at fashion. And here you can see exactly what I was talking about. And this graph, out of all of the verticals that we're tracking, probably shows it in most stark detail of this kind of divergence between Google demand and Facebook kind of push marketing, where in fashion, with the lack of events and any sort of kind of public appearances, there's so much less search demand in the fashion category, which is why here you're seeing Google spend down about 60%, which is the heaviest drop off we're seeing for Google across these verticals, where Facebook is actually up and over pre-benchmark levels at certain points, peaking at over 20% higher than pre-COVID levels. With the amount of marketing dollars not being spent in Google to capture what was historically kind of normal search demand, the search demand being evaporated is really forcing these retailers to adapt in these times and leverage push marketing channels, like I was saying, to really push out message about merch or push out message about promotions. We've seen almost all fashion brands running promotions that look very similar to Black Friday, Cyber Monday time periods, and really taking this time to clear out inventory that might start to get stale and out of season, and really be able to meet those cash flow demands. And you're seeing conversion rate here peak up to those pre-benchmark levels for those same reasons of traffic mix that we were alluding to. And now, while these brands are running very deep discounts and definitely taking a hit to margin, we're still not seeing revenue, kind of touch those pre-COVID benchmark periods, with revenue in fashion still down about 30-35%. Essentials is a whole nother world, and we're seeing the exact opposite trend here. So much more search demand for essentials as people are switching their consumer behaviors from their original distribution methods to now changing into online methods of distribution. So things that you used to buy at a local pet store, at a local grocery, at a local big box retailer, whether they're open or not, we're seeing a lot of consumer behavior shift to online to avoid face-to-face interaction and maintain quarantine or social distancing. And Google search demand is just going nuts. I mean, you can see 400, 500% increases in normal Google demand. Facebook spend is up as well, not nearly as high, because there is so much more on-site activity. Retargeting cookie pools have really swollen, and there is a lot more demand to be able to capture out of Facebook. But you really don't need to use push marketing channels for essential categories when people are already looking for you, and there's so much high intent search traffic. So we're seeing conversion rates here up about 100%, but in reality, conversion rates are probably up even more. This is the opposite example of what we were seeing in fashion and omnichannel in general, where conversion rates are up even though there's so much more new to site traffic. With Google spend and Facebook spend both up big, the amount of new to site traffic is becoming a much larger percentage of the traffic mix. So if you were able to splice this data and look at conversion rates for new versus repeat respectively, on the new to site part of the business, I would bet that conversion rates are actually up even more than 100%, given that these consumers have such high intent and coming from channels like search. And then lastly, it's kind of our last look at the dashboard here before we get into some other interesting cuts of data from Veronika, is looking at the luxury category. And luxury is unique because there's a much higher brand sensitivity on luxury than typical fashion, and also a much less usage of promotions to drive revenue and to drive eyeballs. So our luxury retailers are definitely not doing nearly as much promotion, and for some of them, they don't even do Black Friday, Cyber Monday promotions. So going to that type of playbook isn't even in the cards for them, and they're just hunkering down, not spending nearly as much, missing revenue targets as needed to protect their brand and their brand image. And this is another place where site traffic is down huge, which is why it appears as if there's a massive conversion rate spike. But in reality, it's just that there's way less new to site visitors, and it's really just the repeat site visitors and returning customers that are coming to the site and buying, which is what is skewing the traffic mix to make the conversion rate appear higher. Now, we are seeing revenue still come back to normal levels. Again, I think a big part of this is due to the fact that you can't buy luxury in store. So if you do want to buy a luxury item, give a gift for a significant other, or maybe there's a birthday or something else happening in your life, they are still buying, but at this time they have to buy online. So you're seeing revenue look at as if it's pre-COVID levels here, but because this is e-com only, not nearly making up for the losses in brick and mortar retail, but the efficiency is there given that this is e-com direct to consumer. They're still capturing the margins given that they're not running promo and their ad spend is down pretty big. So luxury suffering overall as a business, but their e-com is now coming back to pre-COVID levels. So just wanted to kind of walk through some of those graphs so that you understand how to interpret the data and understand some of the insights behind them before we go over to some other cuts of data from Veronika and then open it up to our panel discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. So the interesting thing is CommerceNext saw a lot of the same results when we looked at our data. And we wanted to share just a few slides from the survey that this community took earlier this week. We're doing a deeper analysis and we'll publish the results on our blog tomorrow. And then we'll also dig deeper on them on next week's webinar. But we also saw that the industry is essentially splitting into two groups. People are either significantly above plan or significantly below plan. When we looked at the research 2 weeks ago, it was more evenly spread between the categories, but it seems like, people are starting to fall into two camps. We also saw that companies are cutting media budgets right now, even if they're ahead of plan. We see overall decrease in media spending from the folks that took our survey. And that media spend is being cut across the board, across all channels. But to kind of echo some of the points that Joe mentioned in his slides, for those that are doubling down and investing, increasing in media spend, where they're investing it is mostly in digital channels, specifically on paid search and paid social. So now we're going to go into the instant polls. I'm going to trigger the polls for you guys. What you'll see is the poll will pop up on your screen. You'll be asked to answer the question, and then to see the results, you'll want to go over to the polls link and then click on closed, and then you'll see the summary of the results. So I'm going to start the first poll. How has COVID-19 impacted your email strategy? You should be seeing that in a second. Great to see results are coming in very quickly. Give it just a couple more seconds and then I'll start the next one. All right, excellent. I'm going to close this one. What we're seeing is most people have maintained their frequency. A few people have increased, and then a few have decreased their frequency. Next poll, what's your revenue expectation the quarter after social distancing is relaxed? And the goal of this question is to really get a sense of how quickly is the economy going to recover. So do we expect a V-shaped recession, or do we expect more of a slow rebound? Okay, great. It's interesting to see these results. We have an optimistic group. Okay, I'm going to close this one. You can see the results under closed polls. The next question, when does your business plan to reopen stores? We have some folks with stores open now, seeing dates in May, June. And these polls, by the way, are 100% anonymous, so people just see the results in aggregate. All right, I'm going to close this poll. And just a reminder, you just go to polls closed to see the results. And then the last question is, overall, what's your sense of business optimism compared to last week? How are you feeling about business this week? All right. So across the board, it seems like people are slightly less optimistic. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. But I think we're seeing scores across the board here. So thank you all for participating in that. It's interesting to get a sense of where the community is at. I'm now going to kick off the panel discussion. And, you know, there's a lot of data that we can react to. We have the within data, we have these polls. You know, based on all of this, you know, how are you guys seeing your media strategy shift since COVID-19? John, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. Joe, I was looking at the data as you were presenting it, and I find it interesting that, you know, the Facebook data shows that people can, you know, still spend more perhaps on Facebook they can on Google. And I think it's a function of how far up the funnel we're going, right? I think the Google spend is most challenged, and I'm on a couple of other retail roundtables with a bunch of other folks and have heard similar statistics, and you've obviously aggregated them, but it seems that you know, many folks out there are seeing that the traffic simply isn't there. So if you're bidding on the term, you know, leather notebooks, for example, if people aren't searching for leather notebooks, you know, the Google spend is much harder, if not impossible, to spend at the same levels you were spending at. Whereas on Facebook, you can always try and target people who you think might be a good customer or potential target for leather notebooks, using that same example. So I think, you know, there's people who can always be targeted as potential customers, and then there's folks who are actually in the moment searching for that particular product. And I think the bifurcation between that Google and Facebook number kind of shows that, right? The difference between trying to get a customer and trying to serve an ad to a customer who's actually looking for something in the moment. I don't know, Joe, what similar thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that brands need to move product, especially for brands that have seasonal merchandise, which is, in a lot of fashion apparel, footwear, things like that, where the product needs to move. And if it doesn't move, it gets stale. And if it gets stale, it has to get marked down further or moved to close out or in luxury, even burned, right? So for all of those reasons, you're absolutely right, where they're normally relying on Google for a certain amount of their revenue and a certain amount of their spend goes there. But when the intent, dries up and there's literally not as many people searching, they don't have another choice, and they have to push the inventory, and then using push marketing channels, as we like to call it, which is, where we talk about social media rather than what we call pull channels being search, where somebody's already searching for something and you're kind of just raising your hand saying, yeah, we sell that, and you pull them to your site. They're using those push channels for that exact reason, just like you said it. Now, even when they're doing that, a lot of people are saying, hey, that actually must be even more effective than normal because so many people are pulling media dollars out of the market, CPMs are dropping, and all of that's true. But at the same time, it's being hit from the other side in terms of click-through rate and conversion rate on that traffic. So if you're looking at apples to apples data, like, let's call it prospecting, you said upper funnel traffic, we call it prospecting, which we define as people that have never been to your site before or never converted before. If the CPMs are 20% cheaper because more people are using using social media, screen time is up, so there's literally more inventory for the ad units. But at the same time, if you're getting hit on the other side with lower click-through rate and lower conversion rate, then it all just goes out in the wash, right? And you left back to where you were before, if not potentially even worse, where you're not actually able to spend as much as you were before, even in the face of lower CPMs, unless you're one of the lucky few that is in the essentials category, where actually click-through rate and conversion rate could be up versus pre-COVID benchmark period. So that's kind of how we're seeing that shift between Google and Facebook play out for retailers.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of one other note on that as you talked about the fashion piece and talking to. I came from fashion and had spent many years working on a more fashionable or fashion-driven side of the business, and I've heard two themes on the fashion side. One is, and this is going to sound a little facetious, it's not, is that they may actually try to sell the product when people want it, right? So if you think about swimwear, it normally drops in, call it March, and it's on sale and being liquidated before July 4th without question, right? So maybe they'll actually hope to try and sell swim when people normally buy swim, or when you think a normal person, not a fashion company, would think swim season is. And conversely with fall, right? Hey, does back to school actually hit shelves, August 15th now instead of, June 15th or July 1st, which is what we've been seeing as the season start early and earlier. And then the other one I've heard from several folks is, do they just store the product and wait for next year, right? Are there going to be lost seasons? Are you better off taking? And that's tough in a fashion world. Who knows where fashion will be? But if you're selling, I don't know, if you think of a company like a Patagonia, do you just store the stuff, right, and hold it for a year, since that product carries over nicely? A nano puff jacket is just as valuable, you could argue, this year as it was last year. So I'm hearing those two things, that we may just give up on a season from fashion brands and peers and friends in the industry, or sell it closer to when that demand, when the consumer really wants it, and not trying to artificially start a swim season in April and end it before July 4th type thing.
Yeah, no, I think that makes... Go ahead.
I was going to say, because Bill, I remember when we talked, you also mentioned how spring could push into fall.
Yeah, there's some interesting things. I want to push back on John, because I think boots are pretty fashionable. So,
all year round.
They're fashionable, but they don't change that much. Is the nice thing we have, right? They're if you look at some cowboy boots, we've been carrying the same boots for 20 years. But yeah, we got some pretty fashionable boots. I'll give you that one.
Yeah, and for the men, you wear your jeans over the top of the part of the boot. It's the most fashionable part. It's kind of interesting.
That's going to get laughed at if you don't.
Yeah, so it's been interesting for us. So FULLBEAUTY, we sell direct to consumer. So we're catalogs and internet. We thankfully don't have any stores, so we haven't seen kind of the kind of Armageddon that some of the store-based retailers have seen. But because of that, because we're direct marketers, our marketing people end up, they're more like accountants. So everything ends up being fairly mathematically driven. And so we have return on advertising spend targets across every one of our marketing channels that depends on the customer lifetime value of the customers that come in through those channels, and the kind of percent of new customers coming in versus returning customers. So there's a lot of math that runs behind the return on advertising spend targets that we have. And those have been interesting because for Google, for search advertising, they've ratcheted kind of exactly where we're getting the same return on advertising spend as we were getting before. There's less traffic coming through. There's several competitors that don't bid against us anymore. They've really cut back on their advertising, but by the same token, there's competitors coming into the space, especially store-based retailers, that we haven't really seen bidding on some of our keywords. So in some keywords, we're making out like bandits, and for other ones, we're getting a lot more competition than we were used to. But for social, we didn't make a conscious decision to start going after social, and I get Joe's kind of differentiation between kind of pull channels and push channels. But for us, we're just constantly looking at tweaking to get the return on advertising spend that we have a target for that channel. And social for us has been really, really good as a return for us, not because we're intentionally shifting dollars over that way. It's just the mathematical formula has shifted dollars into social because that's where we're getting a really good return. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we're seeing in general kind of, moving a lot of brands over to just a focus on profitability. And for a lot of brands that historically were using KPIs like CPA or KPIs like ROAS, we're now, and we've always been a shop focused on lifetime value and focused on long-term profitability. But I think, there's always been a pushback around the complexity of it, trying to get alignment on that from their board or from their management team. But we're actually now seeing, a lot more appetite for that, given that, these brands need the cash flow, these brands need to service debt in certain cases, and there's nothing better than optimizing to profitability to be able to service that debt or to be able to service the cash flow needs of the business. So we're seeing a shift to profitability, something that is now being kind of celebrated by the CFOs and the management teams, which were previously a lot of times the ones who are pushing back due to the complexity that are now all over it due to the needs of the business.
So I guess that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is, how should we be adjusting marketing KPIs and targets in light of COVID-19? Joe suggested profitability. John, Bill, what do you guys think? What are you seeing in market?
I mean, we've always used, I love to follow the digital disruptors in an industry, right? So if you look at, the Casper mattresses or the Bonobos, and just to have I just love watching those direct-to-consumer companies. I spent a year at Ring, and so just really get a kick out of seeing those companies, get acquired or go public. And I guess a hobby of mine is to read through their S1s as they go public. And there was a couple of them recently that were bragging about their ROAS and in infographics on page 1 and 2 of their S1s, and the ROASs that they were bragging about, I would get fired for, right? Like they were that low. I think they were like a 3.5, if I remember correctly, which to me is a low ROAS, and we don't even use ROAS. We tend to measure our business on what we call eROI, which is a ROAS that takes into the profitability of what you've sold, not just the top line revenue, and it's kind of a term we just kind of coined internally. But I think a lot of those guys that could take a much lower ROAS and were busying up the marketplaces are people. There's just not, the business is not out there to be had at that level for those guys trying to disrupt any number of verticals. And so I think there's less noise in the marketplace. But for what it's worth, we're standing by the ROAS that we believed in, and the ROI that we believed in, a month ago. So our perception hasn't changed. We're not looking to drive that materially higher, and we're not willing to accept a materially lower ROAS or ROI at the moment. We're looking at the same goals that we had 3 months ago.
Excellent. Bill,
Yeah, and
how are you?
I love that you're using margin baked into that, because that's what changes what you're calling ROAS into what's really at that point just profitability, which is great. Yeah, Bill, I'm curious to hear what you're doing.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, we were very comfortable with the ROAS targets that we had before, and we're still comfortable with the ROAS targets that we have now. One thing that we have done, when we're making an investment in new customers, the question becomes, how far out are you willing to have that investment pay back? And for some of the businesses, swim, we were talking earlier about swim, coronavirus was particularly inconveniently timed for our swim business, which is a fairly big business for us. And so we've tweaked back some of the marginal investments out on the fringes in a business like swim, but there's other businesses like our home business is doing really well right now. I think as people they're spending a lot of time at home, they're upgrading some of their home stuff, and so our home business is doing well. So there's other ones where we've either kept it the same or pushed out a little bit. So it's tended to be more category specific than a broad based response, because we were pretty comfortable with the ROAS before. One thing that we have seen that's been pretty interesting, catalogs have held up remarkably well. And so, you sit around the boardroom and everyone's trying to figure out why. And there's all sorts of theories like, okay, people are home so much more, catalogs give them something physical to read. But we've seen catalogs have held up better than the digital marketing, which I would not have guessed that. I would have suspected that everything would have kind of flowed consistently across all the marketing channels.
At least all the ones that are like personal. You would expect out of home, for example, I guess it takes time for that to decrease. But yeah, catalog you would think would be similar to digital channels. We have an audience question. Is Google Shopping a viable channel during this time? Which I think we've partially addressed. But I guess it's somewhat category based. Joe, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Google Shopping and kind of the text keyword side of it are following the same trend. It's really all about whether or not there's search demand for your category, right? And there's not really a difference in trend from what we've seen between kind of text keyword and the shopping side of Google, given that they're both still intent driven. So if you're in a category where search intent is suffering, like fashion or luxury, then you're going to get hit on both equally. And if you're in a category where there's increased demand, like essentials or home for that matter, like was just discussed by Bill, then you're going to see kind of an uptick on both of those. But we haven't seen any deviation from text keyword to shopping during this time, which I think kind of makes sense given this is either a place where your product's in demand or it's not.
Okay,
I
great.
do think, John, I do think shopping as a visual medium tends to do better on mobile than non-trademark. So if you looked at or text-based ads, right? I coined them non-trademark, but if you look at a text-based ad and a shopping ad for a similar product on a mobile device, I do think the visual aspect performs better than looking at that same comparison on desktop. So for anybody curious about that question, I'd encourage you to look at the ROAS at the device level and the traffic at the device level pre and post COVID to kind of look at what that performance might look like. Because I think the device piece of it and the amount of traffic that may or may not have shifted with your customer because your demographic has desktops at home and they're sitting around at home and now using those desktops, or maybe they only have desktops at work and now they're always on their mobile device, right? So I think most folks will see some shifts in traffic patterns between mobile and desktop depending on their demographic.
And are you seeing a shift in consumer behavior now that they're home? Are they spending more time on their phone or are they on their computer?
So I'm not going to share our numbers exactly, but I will tell you I was on a roundtable with like 20 or 30 other retailers, and most people were seeing a shift to desktop, which is not, honestly, if you had asked me a week ago before I was on this roundtable, I would have said, I picture everyone has desktops at work, they don't really use them, so now they're at home and they're playing on their phones, right, and surfing on their phones. That would have been my initial inclination, which would have been wrong. From what I'm hearing from most folks is that that desktop traffic is up, which might
we're seeing the same thing. It's their laptops. They're bringing laptops home with them. We're seeing that mobile's one of the biggest use cases for mobile, of course, is people who are on the go, and a lot less of our time is currently being spent on the go. I think that's kind of why you're seeing, we're calling it desktop, but in reality, obviously, laptop counts the same way. So, it's I think that's why we're seeing that be a larger percentage of traffic mix than normal.
I love that saying. It's basically sedentary traffic, right? It's people who are staying at home is the way you got to look at it.
Sedentary. I like that.
One of the folks in the audience had a question about discounting, which we had on our list anyway. So I want to kind of jump to that one, because you're seeing some interesting things, like brands like Everlane, who were never promotional, are starting to run weekly sales. So are promotions something that you're seeing the industry lean heavily into? Phil, do you want to start with that one? Oh,
yeah, I can start with this one. So that's an interesting question for us, because we're a promotional company. I mean, that's our standard mode of operation is be promotional. But I have no doubt, because this happened so fast that nobody planned their inventory for it. So there are people sitting on a ton of inventory. There's a lot of scrambling going on right now to try and see if you can stop things slowing down the supply chain. But there's a lot of excess inventory that people are sitting on right now. And we talked a little bit earlier. I think John was bringing up, is there stuff that you can, hold on till next season and things like that. But there's a lot of inventory. I mean, it's like bought now to be sold now. And when you're sitting on a lot of inventory, I absolutely believe that there's going to be fairly significant people going into the markdown world more than they're used to.
John, do you want to add
I would
to that?
echo that. I think I've seen a lot of brands that I respect greatly, without naming names, that have become much more promotional. Sales that I would have never expected from some very well-known brands that generally do not promote. So I think in general the market is getting more promotional. I don't think you can promote your way out of these types of headwinds, but I think you have to do everything you can, and that's what you're seeing from a lot of brands.
Awesome. There was a question from the audience about specifically, given that search volume is low, how is retargeting playing into it?
Yeah, I could take this one. I think what you're seeing is that out of the gate, when things started to slow down in the business, like there were still, a good amount of people in the retargeting cookie pool just from carryover of normal time periods. The problem is that as you start to decrease your spend on prospecting, those retargeting cookie pools will naturally just start to whittle away. So in the beginning, when spend started dropping on prospecting and the retargeting cookie pool was still intact from the prior normal period, you were able to convert a lot of those users into customers. But then slowly, as those retargeting cookie pools, are no longer getting an incoming stream from prospecting the way that they normally are, they're naturally just weeding out, and eventually you're left with a new steady state, and I hate to use the term new normal because it's so overused at this point, but you will have not just a new normal of revenue, but you're going to have a new normal of the size of your site audience the same way. And that new site audience is going to have a much smaller cookie pool, which you're then going to have to convert in much lower numbers. So retargeting is definitely always going to be one of the most effective parts of your marketing channel, and something that you're never going to turn off. But it's going to be driving a lot less revenue for you when you start dropping down your spend of new to site traffic.
I guess the only bright spot on the retargeting side, right? I 100% agree with you, Joe, is the desktop function of it, right? I guess, at least in my experience, everywhere I've been, desktop retargeting is much more effective than mobile. So I guess the one bright spot would be there's more desktop traffic to be retargeted to. Definitely not enough to make up for a reduced cookie pool, but
yeah, no, that's a good point.
One of the things, so we talked about promotions. I want to just jump a second. What messages have you found work right now, and what should retailers be avoiding?
We've moved to a messaging at Boot Barn that we provide, protect, and feed America. A lot of our products are bought by folks who work in construction or farmers or ranchers, and you can see that on the homepage of our site. So we pivoted the message to, you know, around this time of year, Stagecoach was going to be happening, and we had a festival message, right? Would be something that'd be very typical around this time of year, spring dresses, more festival driven than rancher driven perhaps. And so we've moved to a message that frankly we understand what is happening right now, and trying to be in the same mindset that everybody's in, and you know, not be as festive, not you know, participate in a National Donut Day Instagram post or something like that, right? So more serious, I think, is probably the right tone, and the tone we're taking, and we're taking that tone in marketing creative as well as emails, and not doing things like push notifications, not doing SMS marketing, which we would typically do. We've cut back on that. It doesn't feel in good taste during these times.
That makes sense. Bill, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I totally agree. You got to be careful on the tone that you're using in your marketing, and there's things that around humor and things like that you might be able to do at certain times that this isn't one of those. For us, what's been interesting is if you look at where customers are doing their searches and spending their money. So, for instance, sleepwear is a very strong category right now. Intimate apparel is a really strong category right now. So anything that's kind of like loungewear, things like that, is hot. And special occasion dresses aren't going anywhere. So as we look at, you know, we're shifting our marketing, you got to be careful about the tone, but what you're actually out there marketing, there's been a shift towards more home-based things, and anything having to do with outside the home is you're just pulling back on, because you're not selling any of that stuff right now.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up, because I think one of the other things that we're seeing is just you need to be adapting your site, right? We talked a lot about, you know, marketing spend and kind of shifting in media strategy, but the website itself is a place where there's a lot of potential with moving things around based on what's kind of top of mind. We're seeing a lot of retailers who sell across many different categories, you know, change completely what's on their homepage, not just in terms of promotions, but in terms of, you know, really showcasing things that are for the home, or showcasing loungewear, sleepwear, things like that, but also doing it in a way that's authentic, you know, not necessarily trying to, you know, cannibalize on the situation in a way that is aggressive, but instead just showcasing creative in a way that is more natural based on what people are doing today. I think the people that are doing best with creative and messaging are the ones who are doing it in a way that showcases what, you know, today's life is like, but not necessarily doing it so explicitly, but more implicit. So, you know, for example, Trade Coffee is one of our clients. They just did a really awesome ad campaign showing people using Zoom video. You know, we have clients that are showing kind of just people who are in loungewear at home. Again, you don't have to say specifically, you know, are you staying at home, right? Or buy this because you're spending more time at home. Like people understand the context. And if you just show people context that looks like what their normal day-to-day life is in this world that we live in today, it just goes a lot farther and resonates with them in a way that makes a lot more sense than if you're showing them creative of people sitting at a restaurant. Like, who the hell is sitting at a restaurant right now? And that's where things can appear tone deaf, even if you don't say anything that is tone deaf, just by showing something that's tone deaf.
Yeah, my husband and I, when we were watching Netflix, were commenting on the fact that, like, you know, you watch TV and you're like, they're not social distancing. It's like a different time warp of what's going on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing that we're seeing work incredibly well, which is so small, but is actually probably the biggest conversion rate improvement right now, is making it incredibly obvious that your product is still shipping. You know, I think people have still not changed the way that they talk about in-stock messaging on their site. Saying in stock today doesn't mean anything like it meant 2 months ago. Saying in stock today is still, well, will it ship? Right? And now you have to say in stock, ships tomorrow, right? Or in stock and will deliver in 7 days, because people are right now saying, I don't know what that means. Is your warehouse open, right? Are you still taking deliveries? Or are you just saying that you have the product physically in your warehouse, but it's not going to go anywhere. And we're seeing, 10, even 20% improvements in conversion rates simply by people literally saying on product pages as well as in cart, will ship tomorrow if you place the order in the next 2 hours, or delivers in 7 days if you place the order by 6 p.m. today. Things that make it incredibly obvious that this product is still going to move.
One of the audience questions is about how you're handling creative, especially, I guess, in this current environment where people are not in the office. John or Bill, do you want to talk about are you using images that have already been shot? How is your team building creative at home?
Yeah, we're using all images that have already been shot. So we typically go on, 2 to 3 photo shoots a month off-site. We've got a photo studio for stills and e-com photography here at the office. And both of those avenues are ostensibly mothballed at this point. So we are using all the creative that we have shot. We could also tap, if we needed, vendor art, right? So the brands that we buy from and sell at Boot Barn, if needed, we could tap their art. But there is no new photography being shot right now. Now we could take and repurpose and graphical overlay stuff that we've already shot. So we're creating creative, but we're using it with existing photography, I guess, is the simplest way to put it.
Got it. Bill?
And that would be similar to us. It's a little bit different in the catalog world because we actually have to shoot every single product. There's no hang it in the stores and let people see what it looks like. So we have to shoot all the product, and you have to shoot it all early so that you can get it in the catalog print production cycle. So we actually have a buffer that we're buffered for probably the next month or two of. We've already shot all of the product that we have. And so then now it becomes a question of, how quickly does the coronavirus thing, I'm not going to say blow over, but kind of mitigate down to where you can start getting back to shooting photography and stuff like that. And so we're in that buffer period. We're not up against the wall yet, but we're coming up with contingency plans, many of which John just went through, that, if this lasts longer, what do we do?
Yeah, and we're still shooting production right now, but it's just a totally different type of production. So we actually sent a lot of equipment to our creative team individually to their houses. So a lot of them now have portable cyc walls, at their apartments or at their houses, so they're able to do certain lightweight production on their own with iPhone or with kind of higher quality equipment that we've sent to them. We also do a lot with CGI and animation. So a lot of the stuff that we do, like, for Purple Mattress, for example, or for other brands, you think you're looking at the product, but it's actually a completely computer generated model of that product. So it doesn't actually require any production. Or in other cases, it's just some lightweight animation done on top of things that you already have. So I think this is a time where you just have to be nimble and creative with what you have at your disposal. But I would also just say that production's not off the table as long as you don't need to do something incredibly complicated. And you can go a pretty long way with some simple hardware and a cyc wall. But CGI and animation, of course, is always fair game.
One thing that we found at FULLBEAUTY is you conceptually understand, okay, hey, we can do this at people's homes and we can do stuff like that. And then when you get into the actual operationalizing it, you go, oh, we should have thought about that. And so just last week we had a photo sample. It was shipped to one of our creative people's homes, right? Because everybody's working from home. And they didn't set it up that it needed a signature on delivery, and so they left it on the doorstep. Well, it disappeared, and so then it was like, oh man, we didn't make sure that you have a signature. That somebody has to sign for it, because now we had a photo sample that we got to go back and now try and recreate. How do we come up with a replacement photo sample for that?
Interesting problems that we didn't think through before all of this. One of the
after it happens, you realize, oh, we should have thought about that. But beforehand, you don't always catch those things.
That's right. But that's good that you guys are sharing this because it helps other people kind of note to self, make sure if I'm sending something important to my team at home, I ask signature required. Everyone's sitting at home anyway. One of the audience questions was about kind of how spend should be allocated. So the specific question was, with some companies pausing spend, do you think it's a good idea to get back to advertising 4 to 6 weeks before everyone else due to the fact that channels are getting hammered with spend? And what channels are a key focus post-COVID for retailers? So I think they're saying how do you beat the crowds and where do you go?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing, if you really want to take advantage of the market, is that right now, if you are willing to take a risk and place a buy for things like out of home or linear TV and look out into the future, like talk about October, November, December time periods. So much media has dried up in market that you can negotiate really good rates right now for things like Subway and billboards and other types of out of home or even linear TV buys for those months, because a lot of advertisers have just taken all their money off the table and they're just plain and simple waiting it out. So publishers are really starving for revenue right now, and you can negotiate some pretty attractive terms, not just rates, but terms also for media buys in channels that are just completely dry. The other piece, if you're talking about digital channels, is that I really like the way that our panel was talking earlier, that it's really KPI driven in the first place. So it should almost never be a binary decision of should I do it or should I not. If you're using a profitability metric as a constraint or a ROAS metric as a constraint, then as long as you're hitting that metric, you should never be off. It's just a matter of how much you spend. So that's kind of how I would think about the difference between digital channels versus channels that you can actually get an arbitrage opportunity on, like Subway and billboard and other types of out of home that, they're just complete bargains to be had, even in more peak time periods that are farther out.
John, Bill, anything you want to add to that? If not, we'll kind of transition to a final word because we're
I guess the one thing I would add, and that was extremely well said just a second ago. So I buy going in to test new stuff that you might not have been in before, that this is a good time to do it. But it just seems to me like that's like timing the stock market. The underlying question is, okay, how do I get in before everybody else? And the answer to that is you don't know. Some people are going to get in too early, some people are going to get in too late. So for me, I'm a big index fund fan rather than trying to guess what the market's going to do. It's if you just keep your discipline of making smart advertising investments as you go along, you're covered for the long term. And you're not going to get lucky and hit it big, but you're also not going to do something stupid and shoot yourself in the foot that way.
Well, we're just about at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific time. I wanted to just see if you guys had a final word that you wanted to share with the audience before we wrap up. Maybe John, you can start off.
Or Joe, you go ahead.
No, I'll go last. Go for it, John.
I think for us, it's, and you kind of alluded to this, Joe, in the beginning, is I'm just watching this closely to see, I think there are going to be people who are greatly accelerated and people who have a really tough time once this is all said and done. I think this is going to accelerate the winners and greatly punish the losers. And just watching how that plays out over the next couple of months is kind of what's on my mind, right? Where are people just, where are going to be the opportunities to accelerate, and where are the pitfalls that you're going to try to avoid? Because I don't think, especially in retail, it's going to come out, if business gets back to a flat business or a +10 or a -10 or whatever it ends up being, it's not going to be evenly spread amongst everyone who was in the mix prior. So that's kind of my viewpoint on where this is going 3-4 months from now, 5 months, hopefully sooner.
And this is Bill, because Joe wants to go last, so I'll go next. For me, I think the biggest thing, we are in literally unprecedented times. There's no time that you have an analog where you can go, oh, this is how things happen at that point. And so we're making this up as we go along. And when you're making it up as you go along, you want to maintain option value as long as you can. And so, I would sit there and say, be flexible, be ready to react, and keep your options open as long as possible, because every day we're getting new information that'll help inform better decisions. And so the longer you can wait to make an irrevocable decision, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah,
Great,
and then
Joe?
kind of to wrap it up from my side, I would say, these are the times where you really need to focus on profitability more than ever. And I hate to see brands try to chase revenue targets that are unfeasible, or chase revenue targets from pre-COVID periods that are just not the same reality that we live in today. And then you're gonna wish you had that cash later that you burnt at a much worse return earlier. So focus on profitability, focus on full funnel attribution, walk away from last click, walk away from CPA or ROAS, and really look at things based on how it adds incremental value to your business. We're trying to help brands as much as we can with really creative cash flow options or pay for performance pricing models and things like that allow us to align incentives between both sides and also help them with cash flow at the same time. If anyone is looking for help, we're also doing free audits. So if someone wants a quick look from an outsider on their marketing channels and how to make things more efficient, we're happy to help. Feel free to reach out to us at within.co, and really just appreciate you having us on today, Veronika.
Of course. Thank you all for participating. Just a few things. There's some resources. I'm not going to go through these, but in the deck, if you download it, there's some resources for you to use. Included in there is a link to Within's Pulse. There's also links to general COVID data and information, as well as Adweek has opened up their job boards for free. So if you're hiring, you can post your jobs for free, and if you're looking for a job, they're available as well. So we've included those resources in the deck, and then we've also included some ways to kind of help from a charitable perspective. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, John, Joe, Bill, for sharing your valuable insights. We hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Take care.